I'm going to start with the story. It's a true story. I know it even though I heard it secondhand. Okay, so apparently when Lindner presented his very famous paper in the AA meeting in 1955 or 1956, his discussion started the discussion by saying, you know, John Lindner, sort of used here data of the last 40 or 50 years and interview managers, and many things have happened in the world. First World War, Second World War, Great Depression. There's only one thing that remained constant. Dividends have been smooth. Okay, so throughout that, and it's still true also 60 or 70 years later. Sort of this is one of the biggest phenomena. Now again, I didn't hear it firsthand. This was sort of before I was born, but I heard this from two people, so I'm pretty sure that this is a true story about dividends. Now, what I want to do here, I have a very ambitious plan. First is to generate a discussion. Second is to give quick overview of payout with a few highlights about what I think are only sound areas that sort of we need much more research about, and then actually go to two particular aspects that I think are sort of screaming for more research. And I'm going to talk through these two issues through two recent working papers, or show that I have. Okay. And those two issues are dividend taxes, and then how much are we missing by looking at payout sort of in isolation, and it will become clear in sort of an hour or so. Okay, so let's just start with a few charts. We look here at aggregate payout activity. So this is actually dividends, and sort of what you see here until 2001, this is the disappearing dividend of Roman French. And from 2001 till now, this is the reappearing dividend that no one yet wrote about. So they published the paper in 2001, exactly when sort of this trend happened. But we see actually the sort of the trend had reversed itself. The overall aggregate payout are sort of pretty sort of stable. We see an increase, and most of the increase is happening actually not through dividend but through repurchases in the last 30 years. This is the same, conveying the same story, but here the picture that you see is through dollar amount rather than sort of through the number of payers. And sort of this is the crisis that sort of we're all familiar with, and you see here what has happened to the total payout, mainly through a drop in share repurchases, but not only. The next slide is almost the same, with the difference that here we're also comparing. I also compare it to earnings. This is the familiar phenomenon that dividends are more smooth relative to earnings than repurchases, and I think this is sort of interesting and sort of related also, by the way, to the presidential address that David Charlton gave yesterday. What you see here in financial firms, this is one of the only times that we can record that actually we see such a sort of widespread reduction, not only in purchases but also in dividends. And there are several papers actually that sort of look at exactly this phenomenon. Dividend fell dramatically. Financial firm during the recession because they were apparently in such a sort of dire situation that they had even to do that, even though we do know that firms are extremely reluctant in sort of cutting dividends. Okay, dividend decisions are very routine and conservative. This is sort of a quote from the paper that I have with John and Alon and Camp. Unless deviation from a usual policy is contemplated, repurchase, how the firm do the execution, mainly mechanical, but not only. Alice actually has several papers exactly about sort of about these issues. Some judgment is mixed. The claim to successfully time the market, whether they do or not, is still somewhat debatable. What they do say that this is not how exactly they do implementation. This is not something that CEO and the CFO, of course, are involved. implemented by lower level employees or by third party. Many times they give it to sort of to banks to do that. A few more words about smoothing. So I started the talk about smoothing and Lindner. How does this reflect now? Sort of you see here sort of the speed of adjustment or the smoothing throughout the years, and 0.39 we're saying the term are smoothing, and what we're seeing with smoothing, the smoothing of dividends actually have been increasing. Okay, so dividend smoothing, the speed of adjustment have been going down, which means the dividend smoothing actually have been increasing throughout time. And the first thing that you may think about, yes, of course, because now firms are substituting this with dividends. And this is the first thing that Mark Leary and I thought that when we wrote this paper, but it's not correct. This is from the data that actually John and Mark Leary worked for, what, 4 years to collect from, I think, the sort of the S&P from the 1920s. And what you see here, we actually stole a little bit the data with permission. And what you see here is the speed of adjustment or the smoothing in the last 8 years. Okay, so the decline in the speed of adjustment or increase in smoothing have happened way before repurchases start to be popular. Okay, so you cannot. It's very possible that repurchases facilitate that, but we cannot say repurchases, the increase in repurchase is the reason for the increase in smoothing. Again, from the survey paper, one thing that I want to highlight because it's related to what I'm going to do later, the relationship between payout and investment decision. The dark red line is for repurchases, and the blue bar is for dividends. And you see, maybe not surprisingly, that when you think about repurchases, they're more flexible. So management is saying, yes, these are investment. We see them as substitute. 80% of them said it. For dividend, about 50% of them said it. Okay, so and here afterwards in the paper we also differentiate between increasing dividend to not cutting dividend. But you see the substitution is sort of somewhat lower than for repurchases. Okay, what I want to do now is actually to go a little bit through sort of what we all know. I'm going to do it really quickly because I really want to sort of direct your attention to a few interesting sort of phenomena. So the question is, why should we pay out, and whether we should do it with dividend or with repurchases. Part of the agenda that I have here is actually to encourage theorists to go back and start to work on these issues, because as empiricists we're a little bit at a loss in terms of a lot of things that we don't know, and we need some guidance, which these guys don't give us enough of it. Okay, so if we start with the classic M&M, in M&M there's really no difference between dividend repurchases. This is basically the residual that sort of that we're paying, no distinction. And what is clear is in the M&M that it doesn't make sense to issue equity, for example, as I think Gustavo found in one of his papers, and turn around and then distribute it. This is something that is not does not make sense. Asymmetric information signaling. But by and large, for most of the models, maybe the exception of John and William, there is no distinction between dividend or repurchases. Okay, this is sort of like, the notion is, let's go to the middle of Central Park, burn $500,000. By this I'm going to show you how strong I am. And this is really the payment of dividends. And therefore I can distinguish myself for the lower quality guys. And there are several mechanisms, not Central Park, okay, issuance of equity, shaving investment, taxation, but by and large, no distinction between dividend repurchases. Dividend stickiness may take them to more credible signal. It's not in this model, but there are somewhat more complex model that you get you get this result somehow. Now, there was a lot of work trying to look into this model, and I will not present all of it, but I think this summarizes it pretty well. This is from one of the papers that I have with Gustavo. And what you look here is one of the basic conditions for signaling is that if I signal something good. Okay, so whether it's increasing cash flow, increasing ROA, increasing profitability measured otherwise, however you want. Okay, and what we see here, and this is just one example, but it's sort of consistent, that if you look that sort of dividend, basically increasing dividend, basically, as Dick Thaler labeled it in one of the paper, dividend signal the past rather than the future. If you look at the long run, so it's not exactly correct, because actually if you look at quarter after a dividend increase, or sometimes even 2 quarters, you see that earnings move in the same direction, but it's very short-lived. But if you look at the long term, we don't find evidence, not only me, but I think it's almost consensus that we don't find evidence of long-term relationship between changes in dividend and changes in some fundamentals of the firm. What about agency? Again, agency, the most of the models, and most of them we know are actually more stories than models, don't really distinguish between dividend and repurchases. And both of them are being done as in the interviews that we have done, one of the manager told us, I think it was Dupar and Light actually, that said manager may spend money wastefully or burn holes in one pocket. And therefore, dividend or repurchase serve the role exactly like what Jensen and Easterbrook trying to say. Okay, it serves the role of taking this cash out of the pocket so it will not burn a hole. Here the departure from the M&M, of course, if you have these agency issues, is that it distorts investment. Okay. In terms of empirical evidence, probably most support of all alternatives. When I'm going to throughout the lecture, when I'm going to quote survey papers, I will not quote my survey papers because I don't think it's fair. I'll quote actually the D'Angelo et al. I said, we conclude that a framework that emphasizes the need to distribute free cash flow and that embed agency costs, as in Jensen 1986, does a good job of explaining the main features of observed payout policy. Okay, so this is the overall conclusion. I want to emphasize it, and I will re-emphasize it because I'm actually going to challenge it toward the sort of end of the talk, even though a lot of my conclusions are also like that. Survey evidence, not surprisingly, most managers don't say, excuse me, I need to be monitored when you survey them. They say, of course, maybe the other guy, but I don't need to be monitored. Unless they're, where was it? Wells Fargo. Okay, sort of trading costs, that's actually interesting. The reason why, one of the main reasons why I put this slide is because actually we hardly have any work that look at the relationship between stock liquidity and dividends. It's very intuitive, right? The intuition is, at least my intuition is, that all else equal, if you have stock that are not liquid, you would expect the firm to pay more dividend. Again, all else equal, you expect the firm to pay more dividend. Empirically, it's very complicated because all else is not equal. Because firms that have less stock liquidity, in all likelihood, also going to be the firm they're going to have less of asset liquidity, different type of firms. But I did not find any convincing sort of paper that tackled this. I think this is sort of a very interesting point. Clearly, when you have trading cost, when you have issuance cost, recycling equity doesn't make any sense. Okay, taxes, I'm briefly going to talk about taxes now and then more later. If dividends are tax disadvantaged, and even if both dividend and capital gain are taxed at the same rate, just the fact that you can postpone taxes still make capital gains somewhat more advantageous relative to dividends. Companies should not pay dividend. If anything, they want to distribute cash to shareholder, they should do it through repurchase. What is coming out very strongly, and John Lalonde, Ken and I have sort of 3 papers with this survey. In all of them, one of the things that came very clear is that, at least from the perspective of CFO and CEO, they don't think about investor taxation as a major issue when they come to decide about payout policy, whether it's dividend or repurchases. You see it also from here. How important investor taxation? Not really that important. And when we wrote the paper, John and I had an argument. I want to write third order importance, but I compromised on second. But okay, cost of raising capital, just like transaction cost. Institutional constraint. A lot of intuitive stories about the issue of clientele. Ellen Bernal in Welsh formalizing, but a lot of stories saying maybe you have some clientele that wants some type of sort of payout. Typically, the way the story goes is that institutions, because of, let's say, tax reason, would like more dividend, individual want more repurchases. There is no evidence for that. Okay, if anything, the evidence is the opposite. In terms of the survey, what managers are saying is that actually they don't find any difference in terms of what attracts what. I see, by the way, that many of you take a picture of that. I'm happy if you, those who want, I'm happy to send slides. So you don't have to just tell me, give me your email, I'll send the slides. EPS. I don't think that's a main driver, but clearly it's a driver of some of the repurchases. Hater and co-authors has a nice paper recently that sort of illustrate that yes, sometimes manager is repurchased to try to massage or manipulate earnings, at least to an extent. Okay, so let's take stock where we are now. Signaling motive, clientele demand, tax deferral benefit, investor behavioral heuristic, investor sentiment have at best minor influence on payout policy. As I told you, this is a quote from D'Angelo and not from my paper, saying agency motive, payout free cash flow gets much stronger support. As far as I'm concerned, we don't have sufficient understanding of the optimal mix of dividend repurchases. We still really don't understand not what drive it and how they're being determined together. We have, I think, over the last decade, a much better understanding of smoothing, but still, and I'm the author of some of these papers, but I still have that. I cannot go to a company and really recommend what should be its smoothing policy, because something is missing there in terms of the theory to say, I can tell you which company is doing what, but I don't think that we have good understanding about the why. And this is one thing that I find still sort of elusive. Taxes and payout, we're going to talk about it next. And then we're coming back to is free cash flow that we're all worshiping. Is this really the really the answer? Okay. And Gustavo, please don't, and the rest, don't ask all the questions together. Just, sort of face them. Okay, so this is based on a paper that they have with Martin Jacob, but I'm going to give, actually, the framework I'm going to give here is going to be sort of much wider. Okay, so one of the things that sort of we teach our MBAs, it's really very, very intuitive, is that you have, for a company, you have two streams of cash flow that can pay out their cash. One is tax higher than the other. It's optimal for the company and for shareholder for them to take the channel that is subject to lower taxation. So clearly the theory is pretty sort of intuitive and seems like it's in the first order importance taxation. Okay, if you think about policymakers, okay, this is just one quote, but we can give a lot of them. Changing tax and dividend should be claimed to influence supply of dividend, investor consumption, corporate investment. George Bush abolishing double taxation of dividend will leave nearly 35 million Americans with more of their own money to spend and invest. Glenn Hubbard, then his economic advisor, said that the 03 tax cut will increase the market valuation by 20%. So clearly, a lot of sort of economists that are policymakers, including policymakers that are not economists, believe that dividend taxation has a big impact on valuation, on consumption, on corporate investment. recent change in tax code in Belgium, Sweden, Norway, many other countries that sort of policymakers think this is an effective tool. What about the empirical evidence? Okay, so empirical findings are mixed. Let's first start with Chetty and Size that said the effect of the index of dividend taxation, dividend policies, and corporate behavior more generally remain disputed largely because of lack of fully convincing research design. So I'm not sure that's really the reason, but since the 2003 tax cut, there were a flurry of papers that look at these tax cuts from different dimensions and came up with what I view as sort of far-reaching conclusion, maybe sort of too far-reaching, and sort of I will show you why. But basically, so all we on the same page, the 03 tax cut, May 2003, dividend taxation were cut from top of 35% or 38% to 15%. And this was actually passed in Congress by 51 to 50 with Dick Cheney was the deciding vote on this one. And it was granted for 10 years, and I'm saying it because actually Michelle Hammond has a nice paper what happened when it almost expired, then it was extended. Okay, so this is from Chetty and Sides, sort of simple graph, no control, sort of so far. So what you see here is what happened to the regular dividend when it was proposed, when it was enacted, top 20 regular sort of payer, and for total special dividend. So on the face of it, it seems as if dividends indeed responded positively to this very significant reduction in sort of in taxation. Then the paper, which really is a high impact paper, went further and did a rigorous analysis. The rigorous analysis that did a very nice sort of diff in diff analysis, where they're looking at a firm where the large institution is a non-affected entity, proxied by looking at institutions that are less likely to pay taxes versus institutions that are more likely to pay taxes. And the critical, at least for me, one of the critical sort of steps they've done here is looking only at dividend initiations. Okay, so this is not anymore for the entire sample like we see here, but only for dividend initiations. And their main table, basically what they find, if you look at the control versus the treated group, you see that there is a very significant difference in the post-reform initiation rate of 1% versus 5%, and sort of the diff in diff is also very, very significant. Okay, this is really the gist of their finding. If you are controlling, we look at the initiation rate, it's much higher where there is tax incentive sort of to do that. Another sort of nice thing that they've done, they were saying, okay, let's break it down by executive ownership. Okay, so let's look where executive own more of the firm. They have higher incentive, just personal incentive, to have high response, higher dividend tax elasticity simply because of their own money. And that's exactly what they found. It's true that even before the reform, the difference was large between the two groups, but the diff in diff here is very significant. That's mean that those guys that have a lot of incentive, higher incentive, have responded even more to sort of taxes. And there are several, this is really high impact paper, so it's suggesting tax affect dividend policy. It also, and I think this is the main contribution to the paper, it's sort of provoke us to think about interaction of other frictional taxes. Okay, the other friction here are the agency friction that sort of they're describing. Principal-agent relationship between the size of the tax reform, good agent incentive, or powerful principle necessary to induce larger payout. And then they conclude by saying it would be most interesting to analyze the effect on investment. They're saying, sort of with this data, it's impossible because it's too volatile. As some paper have noticed, and we'll talk about them, the diff analysis is only for initiation. Sort of not clear if the initiation result is really for the long term, only for a few quarters. And what about the effect of sort of repurchases? So first, some follow-up paper, and I don't mention all of them here. So this paper by Blumenthal, look at firm with higher presence of individual as opposed to institution or insider that are more responsive to tax changes, basically reinforcing with much more rigorous analysis the last part of the chatting size, showing yes, when managers have more incentive, we see more of a tax response. Danny Yagan has a recent paper in the AR using a private firm with IRS data. Find very small effect on dividend, but the punchline of the paper is that the all three dividend tax cut had no detectable near-term impact on real outcomes. Translation on investment. Okay, so he does not find any impact on investment, but he finds sort of some dividend effect. Michelle Hanlon and Hoops find increase in special dividend in the final months of 2010-2012 before the lower dividend tax rate we expect to increase. Okay, if you remember 2013, this was a physical cliff where the country almost shut down, and sort of everyone was sure that actually Obama is not going to renew the 50% dividend tax rate. And basically what you find is that many managers, especially those that have high stake in the firm, basically accelerated the dividend. Okay, because they thought if we're going to pay it in January, we're going to pay 35%, let's pay special dividend in October and November. Okay, again showing in a very nice and elegant way that yes, at least there, seem like taxes have some impact. But not everyone agrees. This is just a bigger perspective of initiation. So this is the 03, okay, but look now from 78 relative to the 03. So you see here that it's true that it's special, but it's not as special as one may expect if you look at the sort of the entire time period. Julian Eikenberry, our paper by Floyd Lee and Skinner, also showing another thing that I think is very important. If you look at repurchase, okay, which were not subject to tax, they increase by a higher rate than dividends. Okay, so I'm not saying the taxes are not in play, but at least some sort of research suggests that it's not as obvious. Let's go to look at the survey. This is the second survey or the third survey that we've done. And has a tax rate reduction affected your firm decision to increase dividend? So, sort of the answer, and you see that it's actually a very small portion that said yes, it affected our decision to increase dividend or to initiate dividend. Sort of conditional importance of retail, same story. It's not because remember this tax reduction is relevant only for retail investors, right? If you are a non-tax-paying institution, you couldn't care less. Okay, now here, sort of what we've done, I think this is actually a pretty cool part. We went to the news release of corporation that initiate dividend or increase dividend, and we want to see what they said, because one of the obvious things that PR person want to say to shareholder is we increase dividend because now taxes are lower and here you get more money, your after tax cash flow is higher. And this is what you see here in the sort of brown orange. So you do see that increase in this explanation, but it sort of decline pretty rapidly, right? This is quarter by quarter. So this is not something that firms are saying, yes, we're doing it every quarter. So you see it for quarter 3 and quarter 4, and then basically disappear. This number here is 3 firm, 2 firm, etc. Edgerton, this is a paper that was published, I don't even remember the journal, but it's actually, I like the paper a lot, it's a very clever paper. So he showed sort of 2 things that I think are very interesting. First, that while profit increased, actually if you look at the payout ratio did not change. Okay, it's true dividend increase, the payout ratio did not change. The other thing that, again, very simple and clever, you look at real estate investment trusts that were not subject to this tax reduction. Found exactly the same. So at least, again, I'm not trying to tell you that there was no tax effect. But what I'm trying to say is that I do not think the evidence there is clear. So going and doing another study on all three tax cut, I'm not sure it's productive. But looking at other countries, other setting, better data, that may teach us something that that we don't know. So alternative conclusion, repurchase grew more than dividend after tax cut. Tax relation is easy to rattle off, not mentioned too much after 03. After initial surge, initiation leveled off, as did the age of the initiator. Tax matter, but probably second order. So, and this is the puzzle that I'm going to talk about now. Why does empirical research find that taxes have little effect, if any, on payout policy? It is very surprising. At least I would not expect it. Okay, a priori, I expect this to have first order. Now, we have to give a break to ourselves because our data is not that great. Okay, we don't really have data on shareholder tax rate. So Chetin Silas divided the institution very coarsely because they had no other choice to tax-paying institution, not paying tax institution. It's really not precise. We don't have the tax rate on the individual that are holding. Is this the old out from Kentucky, excuse me, or is this Warren Buffett? We don't know that. Okay, so this is one piece of information that we don't have. And then even in terms of the ownership distribution, okay, we have to combine these two together. Not to mention that the Chetin side really pointed out very nicely that taxes can interact with other friction, such as agency issues or other shareholding conflict. So the paper that with Martin, what we try to do is exactly that. We try to look at different data where we were amazingly lucky to get all this data that I told you they don't have. Okay, we were able to get it. Okay, so we have actual tax preference for each shareholder. This data for Sweden, Sweden, Norway, Finland, they just give me your social security number and I can tell you whatever you want about it. And it's available to researchers. Full ownership structure, identify tax variation. Okay, we have everything that you want for something like this. So it's really have such data, it's everything else follows pretty easily. Almost ideal setting, and I'm saying almost because what we have here are only private firms. I wish I had this for public firms. Okay, because then I can add not indirectly but directly to this debate. But we're able to isolate the effect of taxes, an environment that is almost void of other friction. I'll show you that. That's pretty cool, so I can see what happened when we add those frictions. Examine what happened to tax dividend coefficient as more agency and symmetric information likely to be present, and exploit, again, exogenous shock that happened there in 06. So what we find is that without friction, investor level taxation has a large impact on payout. Okay, so if you isolate that, you find that you have impact. When we have more and more of those frictions, okay, actually we see that there is a muting effect. There is the effect of taxation is getting lower and lower, and there is less impact on dividend decisions. Okay, what the 2 or 2.5 conflict that we're able to show that actually play a role is, let's start with the traditional one, which is the agency issue, conflict of interest between owners and managers. Okay, this is exactly what Chetin Silas talked about, this type of issues, if you will, Jensen and stuff. The other friction is shareholder conflict, which is basically, this is not a friction between manager, but between shareholders, just because Gustav and I hold the stock and we have different tax rates and we have different preferences, or because Gustavo also works in the company and he has different preference that I do. So this type of coordination, by the way, that may not affect investment decision because it can be between two shareholders, still can affect the decision about the optimal response to this tax rate. Okay, this slide is just saying private firms are very important to the economy. And the data that we got is proprietary data for all of these private companies. We know exactly who are all the shareholders. We know exactly the tax rate, their age, the gender, the income from all other income sources. We know the data for, we know exactly how much they're holding. We know the tax rate of the corporation, so only to the extent that the corporation is not evading taxes, we know what's going on. Given these are Swedish state corporations, probably they don't evade taxes. Altogether, over 1 million observations from 130,000 firms. Okay, so let me tell you just briefly about the the tax. What was the tax change? So the tax change affected only the investor in high tax bracket. Basically, what the change is done is decrease the taxes from 50% to 42% and allow for a dividend allowance. There is a dividend allowance basically that has been doubled. Okay, so not only tax rate is lower, but you can apply to a base of, instead of 50,000 to a base of 100,000 as a corporation. Okay, so let's start with just the difference in difference analysis. What is, please?
What is the capital gains tax rate for investors?
Capital gain tax rate? I don't know. But here it's not relevant because they cannot do repurchases. But I don't remember exactly what it was. But here,
I just want to see, is it higher than or lower?
No, it's lower. It's lower than that. But here, because these are private corporations, one of the advantages and disadvantages, there are no repurchases. Repurchases are private. We checked it. It's this is not an issue. But that's a good question. So first, we're looking at corporation or firm that are owned by low tax rate people versus high tax rate people before and after. Okay, simple diff and diff analysis, and I'll show you this just in a picture. And you see here the difference of the diff and diff. Right, you see exactly what you would expect if you look. Basically, the high tax rate guy increased dividend significantly more than low tax rate guys after the effect. And this is exactly what you see. From before to after, high tax individual increased dividend compensation. And now we can do the same with really because we have so many variables, all the control variable you want, with cash holding, with operating income, retained earning, growth opportunities, leverage, firm size, owner level variable, all of that. Okay, so what we get there, same thing. Okay, this is what we're interested in, post multiplied by the high tax bracket, and we get the same result, significant increase in dividend for the guys in the high tax bracket relative to low tax bracket. And it's also significant economically of 44% increase. Okay, now this is so far for the whole economy. Where do we start to control for these frictions? So the way we're controlling for those frictions, we're saying let's look only at firms that have one owner that is the manager. Okay, there are no conflict in terms of agency conflict, no conflict in terms of conflicting between holders, and then as we increase the number of owners, we have more and more potential for these conflicts. And so this is what we do. This is going to be the triple difference, the difference in number of owners. Again, I'll show you the result only with pictures. So here you see for one owner. Okay, one owner look very similar to what I showed you before. If you have one owner, if the guy is in high tax bracket, he responds more to dividend taxation than if in low tax bracket. Okay, now what happened with five owners? Practically nothing. Okay, so with 5 owners, you don't have for whatever reason, you don't have a response. And this is basically the triple difference, just the difference between two. We're showing you the difference is not only between high and low, but really also a function of ownership. And to extend that dispersed ownership is also a good or reasonable proxy for conflicting objective and conflict of interest. This is basically the rest of the analysis. And part of it I'm going to show you here. This is the same thing, just with regression. For the sake of time, I'm going to skip it. We also did, actually, I know it's a very simple regression, and it's probably only for the old-timers, but also I like the external validity. Not only looking at the event itself, but saying, let's look at all the data. I know it's only correlation, it's not causation because it's not a shock, but let's look if there is external validity to what we're doing. And the answer is yes. You look at all the data, you look at what high owners are doing relative to a low tax owner, you look at firms that are concentrated by one or two owners relative to firms that have dispersed ownership, and you find the same results. Again, so it's sort of somewhat of a robustness check. I still think it's valuable. Okay, so what can cause it? As I said, we talked about coordination, heterogeneous taxes, and conflict of interest. So what we look, coming back to your question, what are my choices as private firm? Private firm actually have choices. Either you pay it with dividend, or since these are, at least for some of the firms, you can also pay it with wages. Okay, so let's look at those firms that the owners are also sort of working the company and see whether there is substitution, because now the high tax individual have incentive to take money instead of paying it and paying 67% marginal tax rate on wages. Let me pay it sort of as dividend. And this is exactly what you see here. When you have a firm with one owners, okay, this is what we've seen sort of before with the dividend. Okay, low response. You see almost exactly the mirror image with wages. Okay, so one owner, I'm switching much more of my income from wage, high tax, to dividend. With 5 owners, the coordination is much tougher. Okay, because we may, even if all of us are working in the firm, some of us will not work, but even if all of us work in the firm, it's still possible that we get different compensation, we'll have different ownership, makes it sort of much more sort of complicated. So, issue of coordination. Second issue is heterogeneous tax preference. So what we do here, we're looking at firm and we are differentiating firm of whether they have homogeneous tax preference for the shareholder, or maybe there is heterogeneity. This is the standard deviation. And surprise, surprise, we find the same thing for high taxes. If you have owner with high tax, you increase more. But look at the negative effect here. Okay, whether it's 2 owners or 4 owners. If you have disagreement about taxes, that affects you. And again, we have there, sort of not only triple diff, but 1,000 control variables. Third issue is conflict of interest between managers and owners. Okay, and here what we've done is actually very simple. We look at firms, we compare firms where the CEO is not an owner to the firms, otherwise identical firm where the CEO is an owner. And okay, if you have a separation of ownership and control, again, negative effect. So yes, when I'm the manager, when I'm the CEO, but I'm not the owner, I have less incentive to respond to sort of these tax rates. Okay. Let's talk about 2 more things about this, and then we'll move to the third part. Okay. So where is this? What do we learn from here? Hopefully 2 things. One is I'm more confident about, one is more speculative. The one that I'm more confident about is, yes, if you want to use sort of dividend taxation more effectively, the best place to do it is for type of firms that actually have more concentrated ownership, where you have less conflicting objective. That's where we find actually the effect is sort of more effective. In fact, in Sweden, when they applied, if you look at our private corporation, where we have the population, not the sample, they got this tax rate. Public firms did not get this tax rate. Exactly, I'm not saying they did it because of that, but it's exactly consistent with what we're saying. So this is the part where I'm more confident. The part that is a little bit more speculative is what do we learn from this about public firms? Because public firms don't have wages, but as exactly you're alluded to, instead of wages, you have repurchases. So I think that, reduction of debt when wide taxation can be more effective tools. And in public firms, for example, one thing to look actually the speed of adjustment. Firms that have very, very small dividend, that are reluctant to substitute, let's say, between repurchase and dividend, are less likely to respond to those taxes, right? Because what we saw here, that it is this flexibility, we saw it between wages and dividend, but my here prediction, again, it's a speculative prediction, is that we'll find the same relationship with sort of purchases. But the chapter is not closed on that, in the sense that I still think that we need, it is first very important how come we cannot find a more convincing evidence about the effect of taxation on dividend and on investment. And I would encourage all of us to continue to try to work on it. Okay, last part. You remember in the beginning I really drilled into the sort of the Jensen, the sort of the Angelo conclusion. I want to continue with that. So sort of a paper that had Gustavo or the Angelo life cycle view: young firm, raise capital to invest; mature firm, pay out excess free cash flow; dividend when cash flow is permanent; share purchase when it's temporary. Right? This is the sort of the standard view. But exactly like with people, firm cannot be most people. Firm cannot be young and mature. They can be old and immature, but they cannot be young and mature. Raising capital and paying out should not happen at the same time for the same firm, even just for this reason. This is from Ross, Westwood, and Jaffe. Firms should begin making distribution when it generates sufficient internal cash flow to fund its investment needs now and into the foreseeable future. Set level of payout low enough to avoid expensive external financing. I mean, honestly, that's exactly what I did my MBAs. I bet most of you use variation of this when you talk to your MBAs about payout policy. So there is a question here: is do firms follow this advice? To my surprise, the answer is no. Or at least a lot of them don't. 42% of firms that pay out dividend repurchases initiate net debt or equity issue in the same year they pay dividend or repurchase shares. Okay, they externally finance it.
Well, what about Apple in the last 4 or 5 years? And they borrowed a lot of money to use that to fund their payout because they can't bring their cash back from repatriation tax.
So that's a reason. Mm-hmm. We looked at it. It's not the main reason.
It's an exception.
But I don't want to say it's an exception. Mm-hmm. It's there. But it's not the driving force behind a lot of it. But you're right. You're saying, okay, I have $130 billion in Ireland, so I'm going to use it actually collateral and borrow here, and it's sort of a wash. In fact, I get tax advantage because of that. I would agree with that. That's part of it, but it's really only part of it because it started way before. It's really widespread. We're talking about 42% of firms. 41% of pair do not generate enough free cash flow. Okay, it's not the applicant. 40% of them don't generate enough free cash flow to finance their payout. Okay, they are consistently. Okay, let me rephrase it. They are consistently paying out more than what they generate. I find it surprising. By the way, David presented sort of a variation. Those of you who went to the keynote, David presented sort of a variation of this from banking stocks. I just heard about it last night. The paper is not out yet, but I talked to him, and somewhat similar for what banks should do. So the economic magnitude here is really staggering. 32% of aggregate payout are financed with security issue initiated by the same firm in the same year. Conversely, 35% of aggregate proceeds of security issues are paid out in the same year. Okay, so you do back of the envelope calculation, the amount of money that companies are raising, just how much are paying the investment bankers, 2-3%, whatever number you take, and multiply it and see how much money can be saved just from that. It is persistent. 64% of firms that file their payout do it at least once every 2 years. Okay, so this is not just a one-off that I'm doing that. Now, all these numbers I'm showing you here, okay, we are excluding actually capital issuance that we call it not, that is investor initiated, not company initiated. So let's say all the employee stock ownership or exercise of stock option, etc. All of this is excluded. This is a big thing. We're excluding a big chunk, but it's without that. It's not about that. The gap between payout and free cash flow persists, in fact, widens. If you look at 4-year interval, again, it's not the one thing. So let's not look at the 1 interval, but 4-year interval. We find that the this gap is even greater. Why do firms finance their payout? Why do they do it? Firms face non-trivial both fixed and marginal costs, as we said. So here, by the way, the authorship team here, which is, I forgot to mention, is with John Ferramanza and with Martin Schmaltz. We have the true Guinness belief. I'm going to present mine, because now it's the important one. I believe that the main reason for this is that actually it's something that I'm almost embarrassed to say. I remember I had lunch with Luigi's in Gallus 20 years ago. And he's telling me, Roni, why are you looking all the time just at payout? Don't you understand that payout is just a capital structure play? And in fact, what we find here is exactly consistent with that. Okay, this is where I said that we have to look at payout, not in isolation, but really look at the whole picture. For me, the real explanation to what we find here is that actually payout is, to a large extent, much more than even the just pure repatriation tax, even though it's also related to the capital structure, a way for firm to quickly and consistently adjust their capital structure. You may ask, okay, so how come if they're doing it all the time, how come it doesn't explode? How come we don't get to capital structure 100%? Because think about what is happening to equity. As long as market value increases, also the equity value increases, and it can be completely consistent with that. There's also some evidence that it is motivated by agency issues, but not the agency issues that we think about free cash flow, but we have to go back to the capital structure of the issue. Okay, so here I presume that most of the people in some form or another work in payout. Okay, so I think that if you work in payout, what I said so far before showing you this evidence is something that resonates, right? Free cash flow, Jensen. Now, if you talk with people even like John Graham that was here earlier, that work a lot with capital structure, this is not exactly how they think. What do they think about? They think about trade-off theory. Okay, they think about pecking order. Now, if you think about trade-off theory, it's exactly consistent. Okay, the trade-off theory is saying you're adjusting your capital structure as things are changing. One very effective way to do it is actually with dividend and repurchases. And this is where we find that what we see here is consistent with the trade-off theory. It's not so much consistent with the pecking order story. Other motives may also play a role, whether it's boosting earnings per share, equity and cross-market timings. Also, we find some evidence of response to quantitative easing, which also can play a role in that. But this one is very, very difficult just because to find a way to say equity or debt is overvalued or undervalued, I don't know how to do that. Gustav?
How can you explain the recycling of equity where first issue equity immediately to purchase shares or pay dividends? So in that case, the capital structure effect is zero.
Completely. So first, I think it's even a bigger puzzle. We're looking at this, also this here. In terms of magnitude, 90% of what I described to you here, over 90% is with debt, net debt. But it also happens with equity. I'm not sure I can explain that. I can definitely not explain the equity portion. And again, this is equity, not that companies are forced to do it. Let's say an employee come and exercise a stock option and then you get the exercise price. We're talking about firm initiate equity. Okay, so we're not. I would actually say, with all modesty, that probably we're the first one to really to report sort of here the magnitude and the extent of it, but we're not absolutely the first one that sort of thought about this issue in some form or another. So David and Dennis has have an old paper to look at leverage recap. Now leverage recap is a different animal. It's a different animal because this is where you had 39 cases where the company is saying, yes, I'm going to exchange, buy equity and pay debt. It's nothing there is regular and nothing there is hidden. Femme French and Gustavo and authors have a paper that sort of look at equity, but Femme French explicitly look only at not at firm-initiated equity, but actually at equity that is being sort of issued through ESOP and stuff. But yes, some firm, exactly consistent with Gustavo's question, simultaneously raise equity and payout. Even more puzzling, much of this is driven by employee-initiated equity issues via stock option exercise, which we're excluding from here. What we find here is something that is pervasive in magnitude, persistent finance payout, both dividend and share repurchases. Indicate that over 40% of firms do not follow textbook advice of funding payout internally. Again, these numbers, I have here another probably 30 slides to show you all the details. We don't have time for that. But this is sort of really the bottom line of that. And I would really appreciate any questions that you have. We have a few more minutes for questions. Yes?
Do you think there's an optimal level of payout? And if I take into consideration let's say you have an optimal capital structure, and if payouts are used to achieve that, can I then have an optimal payout? Or what is the perfect level?
So I think that actually this one, I would have had an easier time answering a question a year ago before I wrote this paper. Okay, because I will tell you, free cash flow and this and that, and I don't know if I can come up with a number, but in terms of concept, I would have had easier time answering it. Here, I will tell you, I cannot just look at payout. Okay, I have to look at payout and look at your capital structure. For example, here we find that if you are below your optimal capital structure with standard proxies for that, you are doing this debt finance payout even more. Okay, coming back to that, it's part of this capital structure play. So I think it's more complex with just. So I can tell you a few things about which firms are doing it. So typically it's large firms, but it's large firms, 75% of them don't have actually investment grade bonds. So it's not like you're saying, oh, these are the AAA firms that doesn't cost them. More likely firms that are sort of below their optimal capital structure. More likely firm with repatriation tax. Okay, this is also good, sort of significant. But we don't yet, at least I don't have yet an understanding of exactly sort of what's going on here. One of the next stages is actually to look whether the market gets it. Okay, do we get?
That's what I was going to ask. I mean, if you shorted these firms and bought the opposite, what would be your return?
So I want to start with something even simpler. I want to look. That's a good question, but I would like to first look to see what's the market's reaction to dividend announcement of this firm versus another firm, repurchase, etc. And then we can definitely do the sort of the long short and to see. Okay, so given the way that I was brainwashed and brainwashed others in the last 25 years, I would say that these firms that are doing it, I would short them.
Sure.
But probably I'm wrong.
Yeah. You want me to cut that out of the tape?
No, it's okay. I can be like Donald Trump, I never said it, right?
Right.
Roni, what does the 40% look like if you look at dividends versus repurchases? Issuing, say, debt to finance dividend versus issuing.
What do you think?
I think it's much higher for dividends.
No.
Are you much more likely to?
See, it's amazing. It's even more for repurchases, and even more for what we call now, given the referee veered toward this direction, we call it discretionary payout. Discretionary payout are repurchases plus dividend increases. But it's even more, it's exactly the opposite of what we expect. I mean, the reason why I ask you because we all thought, of course, we need to be more for dividend. This is where I want to smooth them. I don't want to change them. But you find it's pervasive with dividend, but even more with repurchases.
So this is going back to your survey from way back when, but could that be related to the fact that dividends are higher, or it's dividends, positive NPV projects, repurchases, there's that big wedge?
I'm sorry, I didn't get the question.
So sort of the waterfall nature of how capital allocation occurs, dividends, capital expenditures, repurchases. If this financing of the payouts is so strong in the repurchases, could it just be really a capital expenditures issue, or I mean, I guess I'm just sort of
You
confused.
see, I think that what else,
Yeah.
the waterfall is consistent with Al's prediction, right? Because I would say I will not cut dividend.
Yeah.
But no, we find it even more for repurchase. So I think it's the waterfall here is not what we get, if I understand it correctly.
Okay.
But we can talk about
Yeah.
later if you want.
It's a question, I have seen in many papers. Do you really feel that repurchase can be seen as a substitute for dividends? Because those two are having different motives and that can signal differently.
That's a question. I wouldn't say it with the exclamation point. I think that, sort of again, the conventional wisdom that at least under some circumstances there are substitutes.
Yeah.
This is where, I try to look through the theory to see where you have a difference. And you have a difference because, dividends are smooth, et cetera, et cetera. But this is one of the areas where I think what is substitution, how they relate to each other, it's an area where we still don't have a good answer.